So we have the second part of 5.4 with 5.6. So just kind of to review along division, if we're going to take 21 or 672 divide by 21 like this. So you first have to see, okay, what number can I multiply this by to get 67? This is where you do your chicken scratch, I guess you could say. You can multiply it by 3. So 21 times 3 would give me 63, and I would subtract 63. Now, because I have a 0 here, I would actually add a 0 right here. So 30 is what so far I'm taking out. And if I subtract this, 2 minus 0, 7 minus 3. Now, what do I multiply 21 to get to 42? So 21 times 2 would get me to 42. I wouldn't add a 0 because I don't need that placement, and I get 0. So this is going to be a perfect no remainder, so it is a factor. So my total that I have here is 32. I would add up those two numbers that I would take out because I would have to add that 0 here in order to make this 630. It's the same thing with dividing with polynomials, except a little bit more harder. So first thing when you're doing this, you want to write the x plus 5, because that is what you are dividing by. And if for some reason there is not a term listed, so I have x squared, and then I have my x, and then I have my number, I would want to write a 0, but we don't have that availability. So first thing I look at, just like before, what should I multiply this x by? Because I want to match my first term with my first term. What should I multiply this x by so it looks like 4x squared? Well, I need to multiply it by 4 first. And I have 1x here, but I need 2. So in order to make that look like x squared, I'd have to multiply it by x. So once I multiply that right here, I would get 4x times x would give me 4x squared. And then I also would have plus 20x. So write that 4x squared plus 20x. Now, just like up here, we subtracted. Now, this is where you have to be careful, though, because you're subtracting the whole polynomial. So subtraction would be to multiply that negative in. So it's like the opposite of the sign that's there. So once I distribute that negative, because subtraction is just negative, now both of these come negative because it's opposite the sign. So now what I have, these two cancel out. If your leading coefficient doesn't cancel out, something went wrong. Here, 23x minus 20x would give me 3x. I didn't touch this term at all. That gets brought down, so minus 16. So now I look at what do I have to multiply this by so it looks like 3x. We'll have to multiply by 3. And the x values are the same. So 3 times what I'm dividing by, and I get 3x plus 15. That is what I bring over here. And again, you subtract the whole thing. It's very important that you would subtract this whole thing. A lot of people get confused and they forget that the subtraction is for both terms, not just one. So I change this to adding because I change both terms. These cancel. This becomes a negative 31. Okay, there's nothing I can multiply x by to get negative 31. So what my answer is, and actually some people write this up here as you go. So I divided out a 4x here. I divided out a positive 3. And I'm left with this. This is a remainder. So it's not going to be a factor, that's for sure. So how do I write this? I personally always just write it as a plus. And whatever number is left over here, I write it on top. And what I'm dividing by is the x plus 5. So this right here is my final answer. Since it's a remainder, that means you're ending up with a fraction. So we divide out the 4x, divide out the 3. That's where those numbers came from. So what you use to match. And then the remainder is negative 31. So pause the video and try to do the next problem by yourself. Or just follow along if you want. So this is what I'm doing here. First thing is, what do I want to multiply the x by so it looks like 3x squared? I multiply it by the 3, and then I need another x here. That's where I get the 3x squared. You have to switch your signs. Subtract, which actually turns this into a positive. So I have a negative 8 here. So what do I multiply x by to get a negative 8x? Well, I would multiply by a negative 8. And then I would have a negative 8x plus 56. Negative 8x plus 56, you have to subtract, so that changes both those signs. So I'm left with a 0 and a 0. So I'm left with this as my answer. There's no remainder, so this technically would be a factor because those are questions we're going to get into now. So is it a factor? Now, if I ask you the question, is it a factor, you can choose. You can choose, do you want to solve by synthetic division, like the previous video, or do you want to solve by line division? However, before you even decide that, you have to look at this. You cannot use synthetic division if this has any degree but 1. So I can't use synthetic division here. I will have to use line division. So I have my x squared plus 1. So I want to see if this is a factor. Does this have a remainder? Now, people think they could have the right answer, but they don't because of the fact that they didn't pay attention to their terms. Now, this is x to the fourth, x cubed, x squared. It doesn't have an x, so I'm going to write a 0x there. Not everyone prefers to do that. I do, just to keep it nice and organized. Sometimes you don't even have to do anything with that term, but sometimes you might have to. So first, what do I have to multiply this by? So it looks like 3x to the fourth. So I need 3. I need an x. That would give me x squared, and 1x would give me x cubed, but I need 4, so I need 3x squared. So again, you always want to match up that first term. So this gives me 3x to the fourth plus 3x squared. Now when I'm writing this, I'm going to write 3x to the fourth because those terms are the same, so I combine like terms, plus 3x squared. Notice how I write it underneath the x squared. I still subtract them, so you have to still subtract both. So you want to multiply that subtraction in. You change both of these signs, whatever it is. So now this changes to adding. These two cancel. Nothing happens with this one. So that one drops down below. That subtraction has to stay with that 4. These two give me a plus 9x squared. So I'm going to write that 0x plus 5. Then I look, how can I match this x squared so it looks like negative 4x cubed? I could have a negative 4 to match a leading coefficient, and then I also need an extra x. So if I multiply that by what I'm dividing by, and I would get negative 4x cubed minus 4x, negative 4x cubed. Now this is where it's important, so I'm going to have minus 4x. And then I subtract those. So this is where it's, if you didn't have this, a lot of people might have gotten that part wrong. Distribute your negative, so this becomes positive, positive, positive. So I'm adding it all the way across. Nothing. I'm still left with this 9x squared. Now I have a 4x, and now I have a plus 5. So now what do I match? So I can multiply this to match, give me 9. So I have my x squared plus 1, leaving me with 9x squared plus 9. So I have my 9x squared plus 9. Subtract them both. Now, since I'm just asking, is it a factor, distribute that negative, I can see that it's not going to be a factor for 2 reasons. One, these cancel. There's going to be no way this becomes a negative 4. There's no way I can multiply anything by x squared to give me an x, because we're not dealing with fractions. So this would be, is this a factor? No, it's not a factor. Oh, sad day, sad day. Pause the video and try to do the other two by yourself. One thing, I use synthetic division for this next one, but if you look to see, you have to make sure to have zeros, because if you have x to the fifth, you'd have 0x to the fourth, 0x cubed, 0x squared, a 0x. You have to include those in synthetic division. You don't have to include those for line division. It might help you for organization, but you have to include them for synthetic division. So pause, try it by yourself. Okay. I use synthetic division. You bring down the first, multiply by the square. I get 2. Add, multiply, add, multiply, add, multiply, add, multiply, add. 0. So yes, this is a factor because I have no remainder. So yes, that's a factor. Try the next one. Again, the next one you have to use synthetic division. Line division. So I'm looking at this next one, the line division. I included, if you look here, there's no x cubed or x squared. I included x cubed and x squared. In this problem, when I looked at what do I have to match, so first I could just multiply my x to match. leaving me with x to the 5th and then x. And I brought down my x to the 4th. I brought down my 5. I still included these zeros. But as you can see with my work, I never actually had to do that. So writing it in this problem, I didn't need these terms because those are still 0. That is not going to change this 0. So yes, this is a factor because there's no remainder. So look how here I did not technically need to have those terms. I would still get the same answer. But up here, that 0x was very important to have so I wouldn't forget to subtract those off. So that's the final part of 7 or 5.4. Now we're getting into the real fun stuff of 5.6. It's just actually putting all the stuff in chapter 5 kind of together to see how smart you are. And I know you're all very smart. So first, this one right here. It gives you the equation, and you just have to choose all the different ways that we have taught you how to solve and solve it. However, this is not the best for the square. There we go. First thing you can do is actually solve to help use your calculator. Now, they could all be on the calculator, and I'll show you that next, but first you go to your y equals, clear if you have anything out, then type in your equation, x raised to, this is not really focusing, but you should get it. Subtract x raised to the 4th, arrow over, minus 3x raised to the 3rd, plus 3x squared, minus 4x plus 4. I'm going to check it because this is a very long problem. Now I'm going to go to my table. So I'm going to push second graph to get to my table. The reason I'm doing this first is I can kind of find different ways to find zeros of the function. Is this focus? Zeros of the function with my calculator. I usually look between -10 and 10 first. They should be in there. Zeros of a function or roots, those are kind of the same thing, will have the x value where the y value is 0 because it goes through the equation at 0. So right now I can write down on my calculator, I got x equals -2. Okay, I'm going to go down some more. Oh, here's some more. So I have x equals 1, x equals 2. I'm going to just make sure that I don't have any other zeros between 10 and -10. So far, I solved for 3 of my roots, 3 of my zeros. Those are kind of the same thing on my calculator. But when you look at your degree, I should have 5 different roots, 5 different answers. I only have 3. Now, this is the nice part of if you know your synthetic division. So I can take this 0. Remember, this 0 is already looking like, if this was a parenthesis, x plus 2. If we were to solve, this looked like x plus 2. We set it equal to 0, and it got us -2. So this already has the sign switched. So I'm going to use synthetic division for all 3 of these zeros that we found on our calculator. So -2 in front of the x to the 5th, 1, -1, -3, 3, -4, 4. Just to make sure I have x to the 5th, x to the 4th, x cubed, x squared, x number. Because then if you don't have one of those terms, you have to put a 0 in that place or else you will get the wrong answer. One thing, since we saw this on our calculator, so multiply, add, multiply, add, multiply, add, multiply, add, multiply. Is when you're doing this, this number should always be 0 because we are for sure saying that these are for sure factors. This should be 0. If this isn't 0, if you found these on the calculator, sorry, you did something wrong. So I did this one synthetic division. Now, based off of the same row, what I'm going to do now is the 1. So I'm going to put the 1 in my box. Again, I'm not switching the sign because it already switches for us when it's solved. Bring down the 1. 1 times 1, 1. Add. Multiply here, add, multiply, add, multiply, add. Good, still 0. So we did the 1, now we can do the 2, because you want to divide out each of the zeros that you have. Bringing down the 1, 1, multiply, add, multiply, add, multiply, add. Now this is where sometimes people get confused. We started with x to the 5th. we took out a degree right here, so this one was x to the fourth. We took out a degree right here, so this one was x to the third. We took out a degree right here, so this one was x squared. So what I have left is this equation. Now, depending on what the equation is that's left over, you might have to solve by factoring, you might have to solve by quadratic formula, usually just one of those two. Now, since this one only has this x squared, I'm going to set this one equal to 0, and I'm going to solve for this. So I have x squared, subtract the 1, take the square root. Don't forget you have 2 zeros here, so x will be equal to positive negative. The square root of negative 1 is I. So my overall answer, you have to include the numbers from your calculator that you got. Don't include those, even if you have it up here. If this was handwritten, you would not get that right. So be aware that that material is still going to be included in next semester and next year when you take other classes. I should have 5 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this right here is my answer. All 5 of these. Pause the video and try to do it by yourself. So one thing when I looked at this problem, I noticed that you have to subtract the 13x squared over, add over the 10. To be honest, I actually wrote it as 13x squared and negative 10x. But then when I looked in my calculator, there weren't zeros. So I was like, something's wrong here. I personally took out the x first because I noticed that they all have an x in common. So I wrote that down here right away because I know that x equals 0 because of this. I put this in my calculator right here. I looked for my zeros. In my calculator, there was a number at -5, y was 0. At 1, at x equals 1, y was 0. And x equals 2, y is 0. Then I divided those 3 out. Now, this does not usually happen, but in this case, the calculator gave you all the zeros. This isn't the best problem to have. So the calculator gave you all the zeros, you divide it out, you should just get the leftover 1. So you have 4 zeros here, just the number. Good, good, good. Next one. So, zeros. Other ones were roots technically because it wasn't given to you as a function. Why is this one given to you as a function? Because this is saying that this for sure is a function. So first, on your calculator, y equals, okay, type in the whole calculator, x raised to the fourth, x, or plus, x raised to the third, minus 7, x squared, minus 9, x minus 18. Go to that table right here. So second graph to get to table. Again, I personally always just look between -10 and 10. So right here, y is equal to 0. So that's going to be a 0 over function. I'm going to write this. Calc and say x is equal to -3 because y equals to 0 that spot. And positive 3. And that's all we have from the calculator. So the calculator gave us 2. We should have 2 more because this is a degree of 4. So we have to divide those out. Again, the sign doesn't switch here because this is already giving you the opposite sign. So 1x to the fourth, 1x cubed, -7x squared, -9x, -18. Woo. Bring down the 1, -3. Add -2, multiply, add, multiply, add, multiply. Again, if you don't get a 0 in this location, you did something wrong. Sorry. So I already took out the -3. Now I have to divide out the 3, the other 0 we have. Bring down the 1, 3, 1, and 3, 2. When I add, multiply, 0. So again, sometimes this might be helpful. So this we started at x to the fourth. We divided out a degree. This is x cubed. We divided out a degree. This is x squared. So what I have left now is x squared plus 1x plus 2. There's no numbers that you can multiply to get 2 that add together to get 1. So we're going to have to use the quadratic equation. So we have opposite b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So this reduces to -1 plus or minus the square root. 1 minus 8 would give me -7/2. So my overall final answer is you had 2 zeros from your calculator, so you have to have those. And then you had to reduce that. So I have -1 plus or minus I, because of the negative, square root 7/2. You'd want to see if you can simplify it. If you can, go for it. If you can't, then this right here is your answer. Try the last one by yourself. Pause. So my calculator, I get -1 and 2. Now when you look at this, x to the fourth, x cubed, there was no x squared. If you did not put that 0 where the x squared was supposed to go, then you would not be doing it correctly. Divide it out. Divide it out. This is what I have left over. I try to do factoring and that does not work. No. Now I have to use the quadratic formula. So I have opposite b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And I get a -23 root. So I have to take out that as an I. So my final answer, -1, 2, 1 plus or minus I square root 23/4. I wonder if you guys can hear my kids arguing in the background. Hopefully you can't. That's why I was trying to talk louder. And there you have it, 5.4, 5.6, and now you guys are all geniuses after Chapter 5 material. Have a great day.